here to have two distinguished speakers with us. Speaker number one, Mr. Nilesh Oak, is a celebrated author, original researcher, and TEDx speaker. With a background in chemical engineering and an executive MBA, Nilesh sir combines scientific precision with deep cultural insights. His groundbreaking books, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen?, the historic Rama, Bhishma, Nirvan, offer revolutionary perspectives on Indian antiquity. As an adjunct faculty at the Institute of Advanced Sciences in Dartmouth, USA, and a sought-after global speaker, Nilesh sir is a passionate advocate for understanding and defending India's grand narrative through logic and reason. Let's give a big round of applause for Nilesh. Speaker number two is Miss Anuja Chandramouli. She's a best-selling author and one of India's finest writers in mythology, historical fiction and fantasy. With works such as Arjuna, Saga of a Pandava warrior prince, Mohini the Enchantress, and Girl Talk, Anuja's storytelling has captivated readers and won critical acclaim, including the J.K. Papers Times of India Author Award. Published by Readomania, her books are widely translated and available in audiobooks. An accomplished TEDx speaker and creative writing mentor, Anuja brings a fresh perspective to Indian epics and their enduring relevance. Last evening, she invoked Lord Kartikeya, the wild form of Ganga, Lord Kamdev, which left the audiences in awe and experienced goosebumps. So we are definitely looking up for some magic today as well. Together, they will explore the profound legacy of India's Itihas, history as a living tradition of storytelling, philosophy, and values. Without further ado, let's begin this 40-minute session with Nilesh and Anuja. 40 hours.
She said, let's do it.
40 hours. We'll break the record, set a record. So thank you so much for that very, very sweet introduction. And without further ado, let me just put him under the scanner here. I think he can handle all the questions I and the audience can throw at him. So let's go for it. So for starters, let's ease into this. So when we talk about Itihas, it's there's so much misunderstanding regarding this word. Is it history? Is it story? Is it a question of faith? What is this business? Can spirituality and scientific rationale coexist? So these are very divisive topics. So for the uninitiated among us, why don't you just tell us what is history? What is Itihasa?
Namaskar to everyone. I also see familiar faces from yesterday. So Mrunalji and myself yesterday must have done something right. Okay, so I see the faces. So the question is Itihas, or if we look at specifically in the Indian context, Mahabharata and Ramayana. And frankly, for Itihas, it is only the Indian context and it is only Itihas, only Ramayana and Mahabharata, frankly. But the question is absolutely pertinent, right on the money. Is it like spirituality? Is it this? Is it just a chronicles? Is it mythology? Is it history? And the answer is yes. Itihasa has everything that we just discussed. But to simplify, I'll give you the definition of Itihasa. Very close to history. So the elements of history are there in Itihasa. But just I'll start with the definition of a Itihasa. There are again many wonderful definitions within the Indian context. But the most familiar, many of you would have heard about it, which is this. Everyone knows Sanskrit, right? No, just kidding. But if you know some Indian language, you're going to understand it. It will surprise you, okay? Pleasantly surprise you. Dharmartha kama mokshanam. Dharma artha kama moksha. Dharmartha kama mokshanam. Upadesham samanvitam. Upadesh, everyone knows generally what it means. Upadesham samanvitam. Purva vruttam. kathayuktam itihasam prachakshate. Now, if you want to understand, like Sanskrit shlok you read and you want to understand what it means, one of the trick of the trade I will tell you is start backwards. Itihasam prachakshate. This is called itihas. Purva Vruttam Kathayuktam. Actually, historical event from the past is taken and told to us in a katha form, in a very lucid form, in an entertaining form. Okay, and why is this done? Dharmartha Kama Mokshanam Upadesham Samanvitam. This is a guidebook, a Margadarshan book, okay, a encyclopedia as a something as a reference book for us, and for what? To achieve Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, or to guide us in our journey for Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So historical in the Western world is a history. And we will use that interchangeably, like I always not use the itihasa, but because the subject has itihasa in it, sometime I'll be emphasizing itihasa. So is history there in itihasa? The answer is yes, it is there. But itihasa many times may focus on chronology and stuff. Itihasa, on the other hand, history may focus on this. Itihasa does do that, but it has a lot more nuances to it, which is to say the guiding book. It's like an open thing, and more in the further discussion, I will tell you some other aspects of it.
So I agree with you partly, and a fair warning, I'll be playing devil's advocate, sir. So I agree with the part where you say that it's intended to serve as a guide to navigate through this treacherous terrain we call life. But when you say that history and itihasa is one and the same, it's interchangeable. I would ask you to elaborate a little bit more, because see, for instance, we have all these miracles in our itihasa. You have gods impregnating women, you have birds carrying sperm, all kinds of interesting ways of IVF, and you have flying chariots, you have Hanuman leaping across the sea, you have women entering the flames and emerging unscathed on the other side. So this is where people will say you need an element of faith in the divine to believe all this stuff. So this is like a child believing in the tooth fairy. It's the child's version of reality, but those of us who pride ourselves on having, on having that logic, a logical frame of mind, who are committed to scientific rationale, what would you tell us when we say, how the hell can itihasa be history?
Thank you so much. Great question. Let's look at where does the history comes from. Now today, both Itihasa's definition has also evolved, and so is history's definition. But if you go back, especially if you go back, again, I'm just to keeping the time in mind, I'll make a broader gaps. If you look at the history before Darwin, everyone has heard the name of Darwin, about 150 years ago, just approximately. Before Darwin, the history, it's an English word, and therefore it comes from the West. You can, as a simple way, humorous way, but actually factual way, you can think of this as his story. Okay? And where does that come from? Because until Darwin, basically for the West, history meant Bible, the Old Testament and also the New Testament. It meant a Bible. So after, it's a chronological, there may not be a timestamp, but after this happened. So if you go to Old Testament, the Abraham and the David and all these things, this person lived for that long, he lived in this village, then he went there, and so on. If you come to New Testament, like the stories of Jesus, okay, again you find different variations, like Mark will say one thing different than Matthew and so on. Directionally similar, there are some variations, and you're going to find this in the Itihasa too, like Krishna's story and so on. But essentially the focus is on the narration, okay, more on the particular historical personalities. I mean, again, I'm using the word historical. After Darwin, the history took a different type of twist, because until then, based on their calculations, even Kepler and Newton accepted those calculations. I don't know if you knew that, but essentially not just the Earth, but even the universe began in 4004 BCE, 4004 BCE. So after Darwin, suddenly the focus shifted. And so now what happened is, besides Bible, there are some exceptions like Herodotus. How many of you have heard the name Herodotus? Okay, so Herodotus wrote something called History of the World. I mean, translated from Greek to English, it's like that. Now, keep in mind, when he says history of the world, what he really means is the history of the world he knew. So he went from Greece and around the Mediterranean, and he went to Egypt and so on. And it's a beautiful, again, chronological narration similar to that. But Darwin changed something for them. They said, because now suddenly the timelines have changed. And what they started doing, and actually what came out of that as a history, which is archaeology, and specifically dirt archaeology, which is to say, the problem was there was no such detailed information either in the Herodotus history of the world or the Bible. What I mean by that is a particular timestamp. So what happened is you dig at certain place, a potential place, you find something, you date it, and you say, there is a pot that you found, so somebody was here. And they try to connect the dots. So that's how they could timestamp. Otherwise, they could not timestamp. So dirt archaeology became the main focus. Against that, the Itihasa. So for example, we'll come to why only India has a Itihasa. But Itihasa has multiple aspects. I'll not go into that. It must have this, it must have this, it must have this. Even the beginning of the universe. A theory. And the theories may change. Puranas also are kind of Itihasa. Just if you may, I take a break. Just to tell you, Puranas and Itihasa. What is the difference and what is the similarity? Puranas are similar to Itihasa, but they are not Itihasa in this way. Is think of this as a going to a gold mine and going to a gold shop. The gold mine, you have to mine lot of dirt before you get the gold nugget. That's Purana. When you come to Itihasa, and in the Indian context or even the world context, there are only two Itihasa texts that have survived, which is Mahabharata and Ramayana. It's going to gold shop. Almost. You can also get zirconia. You can also get maybe what is called design jewelry or something, gold-plated jewelry. So there is some stuff of that, and we'll come to that. That's when the mythology and other stuff may come into it.
Fair enough, because I agree with you. At one point, the scientific minds of the age insisted that the earth is flat. And those who said otherwise were, I think, tortured and killed for the crime of stupidity. Okay, so yeah, I'll give you that, fair enough. But now you mentioned that only India has Itihasa, and I was thinking, but actually that's not quite true, because if you're going to just go with mythology as opposed to Itihasa, then you have your Greek and Roman mythology. Their gods may be obsolete, but the mythology itself is largely intact. You have Egyptian mythology, you have Norse mythology, which has been, franchised by Marvel. So everyone's understanding of Norse mythology is Thor and Chris Hemsworth. So why are you saying that only India has Itihasa?
Thank you so much. Another wonderful question. Now it's about she asking me questions and me responding. But just for that discussion, I'm going to ask couple small questions to you, which is you.
Oh, surprise test.
No, it's not a surprise. No, just for a more, think of this as a clarification. So you describe this beautiful Norse mythology and so on and so forth. Like how many of you have heard Joseph Campbell as a name? Wonderfully, he has just done a wonderful job of explaining those mythologies. Have you heard of Christian mythology?
I don't think they call it mythology, but you're referring to the Old Testament and Apocrypha.
No, have you heard of Christian mythology? No, thank you. Have you heard of Islamic mythology?
I only know the 1,000 Arabian Nights.
Have you heard of Judaic mythology?
No, you're talking about Samson and Delilah from the Old Testament.
Whatever you know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
A smattering of info. Okay.
So what you see just now, I mean, again, this was not to put her on the spot, but it's more we have to go into the word mythology. Okay? Who coined this word? By the way, its origin is in Sanskrit. You will find it everywhere, mithya. Okay? And it is used in the sense of mithya, one thing means false, but another subtle, there are many meanings of mithya. You can go to Sanskrit English dictionary and look at it. But another meaning is something that is temporary. That's also the meaning of it. But that's now, when the word travel there, by the way, and you say, what do you mean by word travel? Okay, those of you who are interested, if you go to etymology, you know what that, Nirukta, 40%, you can randomly type any English word and just look for the roots of it. You'll be you'll be either say, I know that, or maybe surprised if you don't know it. 40% of the English words, they will find their roots in Sanskrit. Okay, now I have done this for 20 years, this whole game, I do it every time. But if you find Latin and those, then the correlation is even more closer, okay? But the point is that word goes from there. Now in Indian context, it means temporary, or it means false, or true, but temporary, the relative reality and something like this. So now what happens is, but remember what I asked the question, have you heard of Christian mythology? How many of you have heard of Christian mythology? No, okay, just you want to go with her answer, right? Thank you. And Islamic mythology, because especially started with a Christian where they thought, Christianity I mean, they thought what they have studied, I mean their history, the Old Testament, New Testament is the factual history. Everything else around the world is mythology. So we are in the brainwashed world that everyone else has a mythology. We don't have to accept it. I don't accept it. We don't have to accept it, but I am not asking you to blindly believe me either. What I will ask you to do, which is what I have worked for close to 40 years now. In fact, I keep on saying 30 years, and then somebody, you know, some of my fans, they say, Nilesh, now you need to start saying 40. Okay, something like that happens all the time. How long I lived in America, you know, for a long time I used to say 20, and they say, no, now 25, now 30, and so on. So the 30 plus years of my work is essentially to look at the Itihasa text of India, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and I put it this way. For example, again, not to put her on the spot, but I'll ask you. If I ask you this question, just go back 2,000 years, okay, and find out some of the characters. I'll start with you. Some character from 2,000 years, say Jesus, for example. Okay. Any other name you can think of? It doesn't have to be exact 2,000. Moses, okay. 3-4 different names. They don't have to be from the West. India also will do. Buddha, Mahavira, Ashoka, Chandragupta, and we can just go on, okay? Any more additional names you want to add? Last chance. Kalidasa, very good, thank you. So you add all these names, put them on this one side, and now I'm going to take 2 Itihasa characters. Ramayana, I'm going to take Ram, and from Mahabharata, just for simplicity, I will take Krishna. It could be Bhim and doesn't matter, changes. Ram and Krishna. If I ask you, we talked about history, and usually the history done either through Bible, Herodotus, or dirt archaeology. If I ask you, just your understanding of it, who do you think these 6-7 characters about 2,000 years ago that we discussed, and 2 characters, Ram and Krishna on the other side, who do you think has more scientific, empirical, therefore testable, logical evidence? Just your guess. This group here, about around 2,000 years ago, or Ram and Krishna, the so-called mythological characters? Do you know the evidence? What is it? Okay, no, hold, I'll stop you there. I don't. Good answer, but see, birthplace also exists for all the other characters. Same thing. No, hold on. Same thing. For Jesus also, you have the Jerusalem, the Nazarene, and everything. Guys, maybe you have not studied those other characters well. No, any other? Otherwise, huh? Well, they also have a timelines about 2,000 years ago. Actually, huh? Ramasetu. Okay. Okay. No, we also know exactly when Jesus was born. Okay. Manuscripts are there on the both sides. There is an Old Testament, New Testament, Bible. Okay. Something. Good try. Thank you very much. Okay. But all that you said is actually true on both sides. All that you said is both sides. Actually, I gave a clue. I said scientific, empirical, but you didn't come to that. Just telling a place is not scientific. Okay? Even the Dwarka, you said Dwarka, I mean, again, thank you. Dwarka, we even can say there are many Dwarkas right now. We don't even know the exact location of Dwarka and so on. My point is, so the answer in that way, so the reason we need to change our perspective is I am going to assert, and you know everyone understands what assert means? Assert means what I'm going to say is backed by evidence, and empirical and testable evidence, scientific evidence, logical evidence. There is an enormous scientific, logical, testable evidence for Ram and Krishna. And as far as I'm not talking of textual evidence. You said manuscript, thank you. Because those are equal. Anything that you said which is equal on both sides, I am taking it off because that's like a 1:1, 2:2, 3:3. But all that just now I said, a clinching type of evidence which you think impossible, next to impossible that this is possible, but modern science says that is actually possible. That kind of evidence exists for Rama and Krishna, and none of that kind of clinching evidence exists for all other characters. Jesus, Kalidas, Alexander, you didn't say Alexander, I'm including Alexander, okay? And all the other names that you said. And that distinguishes, but I'm saying that's what makes the Itihasa more special.
So, since I'm very committed to my role as the devil's advocate here, I'm going to go out there and say, what if not just Rama, Krishna, Alexander, all of them, historical, mythological, we've just blurred those boundaries at will, and we are saying that there's, empirical, irrefutable evidence only for two. Now, I'm going to take it out there on a limb, and I'm going to say, what if not just Rama, Krishna, Alexander, but all of us here? What if we are just characters in a story? What if we are plugged into the matrix and we don't know it? What if there's some kid in boxers playing a video game with you and me on the screen?
Okay. Again, a brilliant question, okay? What if right now you think you got up in the morning, brushed your teeth, took shower and came for the OCLF 6th edition. Instead of that, you just pinch yourself or somebody next to you slaps you, you wake up from your sleep and you say, oh my God, I'm late for the OCLF day 2 or day 3. That's possible. So what you said is actually amazing. In fact, if you go back into the Indian philosophy, it will say that's exactly what we are doing. It's Leela.
Maya
And Leela. Okay, that's what is going on. So how do we answer that question? Well, truly, we don't know the answer. But we make some pragmatic approximations. Which is, how do we make pragmatic approximations? Just as an example, if you are dreaming, how many of you get dreams? Or how many of you have dreamed sometime in the past? No, some people have never dreamed. Okay. So if you have dreamt before, that time when actually dream is happening, you think this is the reality. You don't think when you are in the dream, oh, I am having a dream. You don't think like that. You think it's a perfect reality. But then when you wake up, you realize it is a dream. And if you compare your experience right now, unless you are sleeping and dreaming right now, okay, if you consider your experience right now versus the dream, you know that there is a difference. Do you agree? Okay. Something like that, ma'am, what you said is actually true. Even, that I don't have an experience of it, but people say when you go to the higher reality and then you look at your current life, the kind of life we are going on in this kind of room right now, it feels like a dream. It has an inferior quality and so on. So this is a kind of a perpetual train that may not end, okay? But therefore, I'll make an assumption, and tell me if you agree with it or not, that actually right now we are not dreaming, but we are awake and if we are, say, discussing.
I think my guess is as good as yours as to whether we are dreaming or not, because I'm a Christopher Nolan fan. He made his reputation, his fortune with Inception. And his whole dream versus reality, dream within a dream, and the Wachowski brothers with their Matrix. So I think, your guess is as good as mine. I'm willing to keep an open mind. But now I'm going to graduate from, or devolve from devil's advocate to Twitter troll. Okay. Now the thing is, when you go and, when you make these statements, where you say that Alexander, you brought up Alexander. Alexander the Great, some consider him a sadist, some would say hero, who the hell knows? Maybe it's two sides of the same coin. So you have Alexander and you put him in the same sentence as Rama, Krishna. So you have this, now there's this strict dichotomy. Those who belong to the realm of science and those who belong to the realm of the divine. One calls for faith, one is all science. And if you try to mix the two, the Twitter trolls will come after you and say, this is pseudo-science. This is WhatsApp University. People who listen to these lectures are idiots. And there'll be that WhatsApp forward, and they'll troll you, they'll make a meme out of you. I'm very meme worthy. So, it's like you'll be doing like this in front of the mic and it's there on the internet and you look ridiculous. So, that's what the Twitter trolls are going to say. This is pseudoscience. I know you're supposed to block the trolls and move on, but just for argument's sake, what would you say to those who say, no, how dare you mix this up? How dare you call it a science? Where is the science? Where is the clincher?
Great, thank you. In fact, I don't mix them up. Only difference is, whereas let's call them trolls, Twitter or otherwise, whereas they think this first group, remember the 2000-year-old group, where they think this is real, these all guys are real and that's a history, and this Rama and Krishna are mythology. I am not mixing them. I'm saying they are indeed separate, and this is the difference. I'm not saying these are fictitious characters. That's not my argument. Okay, they can be real, they may not be real. These, to me, they are real. But if you go into, I'll use some complex words, not for her, but maybe some of the audience, just to maybe to impress you guys. How many of you have heard epistemology? Just raise a hand. I will not ask you for definition. Epistemology, thank you. Ontology. Okay. In a simple language, others guys, you need not worry. These are just complex words to impress, you know. But epistemology simply means what are the limits of our knowledge. And ontology means how do we know that something is true, really true, in that sense, okay? So in fact, what I'm saying is, there is a sufficient evidence which is more powerful for our Itihasa characters, not all Itihasa characters, but Ram, Krishna we can say, and Duryodhan and others, in comparison to this. Nowhere I'm saying that these are fictitious characters. Everyone follows me? But all the evidence that is available for them is basically a textbook, like what you call manuscript type of evidence, a written evidence. That is the evidence they have, okay? Whereas here, you have, now you say, well, there's only written evidence, like Ram and Krishna only, isn't it Mahabharata and also Ramayana written? But there are certain observations in the both Ramayana and Mahabharata, which at the surface will feel like, come on, are you kidding? This is impossible. But when using the modern science, we look at those observations and with sufficient efforts, like one shlok from Mahabharata took me 15 years to demystify. Okay? When you look at that, everything falls like a jigsaw puzzle. You say how many coincidences you need. I mean, one thing could be a coincidence that happened to match. What about another? How about if I tell you there are 300 pieces of evidence in Mahabharata, they all come together to one date. In case of Ramayana, 600 pieces of evidence, they all come to one date. And this is only astronomy evidence. And there is a much more non-astronomy evidence. So my point is, there is a lot of scientific evidence on this side. There is zero. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these are fictitious characters. But if somebody is looking for scientific, empirical, testable, clinching evidence, there is a zero evidence for these 2,000-year-old characters. So I am differing from them in the other direction. They are thinking this is scientific, this is not. I'm saying it's the other way.
All right. Now, this is a two-part question. Okay, so I'm going to start with the fact that we'll go with history's lessons. We know that history tends to repeat itself. Now, if you take, I mentioned Egyptian mythology and Norse mythology and the fabulous body of Greek and Roman mythology. Now the thing is, all the, we can call them characters today, all the characters there are no longer worshipped, though they once were very, very powerful gods, but they've become obsolete. Closer home, in the pre-Vedic age, the nature gods, I'll just call them the nature gods for simplicity, your Indra, your Agni, your Varuna, your Vayu, they were worshipped. Indra especially was highly powerful, but today I don't think there are very few Indra worshippers, if at all. You know, the Trinity supplanted these gods. So Krishna and Rama are part of the Trinity if you're going with Vishnu's avatars. So my question is, what if history repeats itself? What if thousands of years from now, the Trinity is supplanted? And the next part of the question is, how come only these gods, Hindu mythology, the gods, the Trinity, how come they have survived, they are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago? How is that? How did that come about only in India? I mean, what explains the longevity, though we've been under foreign rule for a long time? It was the Muslims and then the Christians, and they have a record. Now, if you take the Mayan and Incas, I'm sure the plural thingy is wrong, but the point is, you know, it was destroyed. They made it a point, the Spanish conquistadors, when they landed in Central America, they wiped out that entire civilization. Now, a few researchers may devote some time to it, but it's not part of mainstream consciousness. Whereas this, despite centuries of foreign rule, how come it survived? What's so special, unique about it that it's been preserved, almost intact? That's a miracle.
Yes. True, very true. So two questions. That first question you ask is have the importance of certain deities or who we consider God or deify them, has it changed? Absolutely. You described it beautifully in that question itself. That just to use the a simple word God, like gods of Rigveda, like Indra, Vayu, they may be worshipped or they may be adored or whatever, in the Rigvedic times, not so much into the later times. In fact, in Mahabharata, we have this wonderful story of Krishna and a Govardhan, where Krishna is saying the original idea for Indra, maybe Indra is a rain god and the god of a nature and provides the nutrition and is so worshipping Indra. In fact, when we think of a yajna or a worship, okay, worship is again English word, but I'm sticking with it right now. Yajante satvika, which has to do with a yajna. Which is to say, do a certain action which is a sustainable action in a modern language, like completing the cycle of nature and whatnot. But people may miss the original intent and it may simply become just a symbolic one. So I think, again, I'm speculating, but possibly that's what Krishna was trying to change. He's saying you have lost the original meaning of Indra worship and we want to do this. They say, why worship Indra that you don't even see? How about taking care of this Govardhana? I'm making my word, like put the trees on it and, don't cut it too much and something like this. And so changes. So the changes have happened and they will continue to happen. For example, I don't necessarily understand the human psyche behind it, but maybe the gods which are in the recent times, we feel closer to them. In the sense, God in a deified sense. For example, like think of Sai Baba. Think of Gajanan Maharaj Shegav, you are in Nagpur, so most of you would have heard that name. Akkalkot Swami Maharaj, something like this. In fact, in Mumbai, when I was going there, Akkalkot Swami ashram or something is more busy in comparison to even a Hanuman Mandir and a Ganesh Mandir. So some of the changes kind of has happened. So that's happening. Let me quickly jump to the second part. And just give me a clue. What was that?
I'm asking, what is the secret? What is the explanation for the
survived.
longevity? Yeah.
Okay. In fact, what you will find based on, again, my research, that this is how I put it. Many times people will ask question and say, hey, we do like this, but what about them? Or they do that, but we, us. And, us versus them language comes. And it is true, like Abrahamic religions versus the Indian religions or Chinese type of religions. And my simple way of saying it, if you go back about approximately, like say 4,000 years ago, 2000 BC or before, I say there is no us versus them. Actually, you find the kind of civilizations, many different connections, but they were interlinked. To the extent, like my research is connecting the whole Indian text and the stories all the way to South America. But because you mentioned Egypt and Herodotus, I will also connect to Egypt. In fact, you said something very beautifully, that they described at least the earlier people as deified, but not the later on. They lost it kind of thing. Whereas in India, it seems to continue. So the answer why it seems to continue in India, not so much the deification, but you again beautifully put it, which is to say even the old gods, so to say, are equally relevant in an Indian context, like a Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. One of the reasons of that, I wouldn't say the only reason, which is also one of the foundation why only India has Itihasa, although that's not exactly the same thing, is the Guru Shishya Parampara. Okay? Guru Shishya Parampara is something that is there where the Shishya has like a complete faith in the Guru, sometimes maybe even misplaced, and you might get exploited if you don't do it the right way, okay, so on, But then that's how the knowledge was transferred into that reverence, into that Shraddha and Nishtha. And that's what ensured a close to, if not the exact, propagation of that same knowledge, the same enthusiasm and same information 4 times. And still the changes did take place. That's not to take it away. We don't do the Indra Puja so much that now we do it. So that has happened. But my point is that exactly the same knowledge in a somewhat modified form existed in the east of India, it existed in the west of India, and even the South America and so on. Quickly, I'll give you an example. South America, you can watch my podcast. I don't know how many of you have seen my podcast or some YouTube video before coming here? All right. Those who you have not, you have a lot of homework tonight. Okay. So that's what it is. But even you see that in the Herodotus, Just because you mentioned initially they mentioned the deified God, but afterwards they don't mention it. Let me pull from Herodotus just one example which directly connects with the Ramayana. Just think of that. So Herodotus goes from Greek, he's a Greek guy, goes to Egypt, and an Egyptian tourist guide, just for a lack of better word, he along the Nile, this tourist guide shows Herodotus 341 statues. Okay, it's a Herodotus History of the World, book 2, and chapter 124 through 142, 143. This may sound like Zakir Naik. But this is for a reference that you can go back and trace it if you want to do. So there in 120, so this guy shows 341 statues. He says each king, this king is a son of this, all are kings. And he says each king, if you do the approximate, about 33 years per king. He does a quick math. I'm going to do a quick math. 341 comes to 11,340 years. Just simplify 11,500 years. I'm taking you somewhere with this, so stay with me. Now this discussion is happening 2,500 years ago. Okay, so 2,500 plus 11,500 is how much? 14,000. Now 14,000 years ago is what I have shown by 600 plus references. Valmiki Ramana's Ramayana happened. Okay, now go back to chapter 124 of Herodotus. He says this first king, from there this 341 came. The first king was, again English translation of a Greek and what? Like God. He was like God. His rule was amazing and a very peaceful, like in a modern language, because I'm going to make that connection. Think of this as a Rama Rajya. But after that, Herodotus says, none of those 341 were God. This first guy was a God, but none of the 341 were God. And do you know the name of that first king? I'll just say that and I will stop answer to this question. His name, Ramph Sinitos. Back to you.
Okay. So he threw a lot of numbers at us to deliberately bamboozle us. I think somehow he intuited that I suck at maths. So, but a quick question before I open up the floor for audience questions. Now, sir did say that we have that common ground with the West. I agree, because if you take the Greek and Roman mythology, Egyptian, it's always the story of Pralaya, the great flood, and you have the ark, and there you have Noah leading you to the ark, and here you have, we have a similar version. The Matsya Avatar deals with it. So yes, we do have that common ground, that interplay of ideas. Now my quick question is, what would you say to those who say that this Itihasa has been used as a tool of oppression and tyranny? Who cares if they're gods and kings or politicians or prime ministers or presidents? What if they're all glorified tyrants? And you mentioned the Guru Shishya Parampara, which you mentioned, of course, he covers all bases. He said it has to be done right or there's scope for exploitation. But the Shraddha, it calls for unquestioning faith, which is a fertile ground for exploitation. People will tell you about the much maligned caste and misunderstood caste system. They will talk about women's rights, about how women were oppressed, sati happened, Johar, all this they'll say is the dark side of Itihasa. So a lot of people say, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's dump this, let's drag this structure down to the ground. I think it's a terrible idea. I love Indian mythology, and I think we can take the good stuff like the swan and question the rest. So what would you say to those who call Itihasa a tool, a tyrant's tool?
Great question again. Now, do you know who says this, by the way? Do you know what she said is true, actually? That, Itihasas, or Ramayana, they were written as a text, you can say, to control, to oppress, okay, to make people, used by kings, for example. Okay, they will use some, just like the epistemology and ontology, they will use the words like cosmopolitan and stuff like that. Have you heard the names? Or we are just talking here. We could talk in private if you have not heard these names. Okay, so for example, this has come through many things. The colonial studies, imperial studies, then that turned into postmodern studies. How many of you have heard names such as, say, Sheldon Pollock? I'll just take one because of just maintain time. Okay, so likes of these. So my response to them is, what you ask, is my response what I have given to Sheldon Pollock. How many of you have heard the name Rajiv Malhotra? Okay, others, homework to do. Okay, Google, see, find who is Rajiv Malhotra, type Nilesh Oak and many other names, find out what they have done and start reading. So Rajiv Malhotra held 3 conferences just on Sheldon Pollock, the postmodernism nonsense. Okay, and so my response to that is, actually I gave one response. Rajiv Malhotra has also called for an open debate on camera. Rajiv Malhotra doesn't say that, I say it, you might have heard me, on camera, uncut, unedited. And if it needs to go for an infinite time, I'm fine, 40 hours. we are fine with it. But what is the response? The response to this is they are claiming, and you beautifully summarized, that this was basically the text written taking the benefit of people's trust or trust into the divinity of Ram and Krishna, and then used it to oppress the masses. Okay? Great thesis. How many of you have heard of, and this is my response, how many of you have heard of the name Christopher Hitchens? No, just couple here, so I can bluff, you know. Okay. No, Christopher Hitchens is like a British, now he passed away just few years ago. A brilliant mind, like a well-known public atheist, if you want to call him. After his name, there is something called Hitchens razor. And so that is my answer, that is my response to this postmodernist nonsense, which is this. A claim, so they're saying these texts are written as a text meant to oppress people and control people and so on. So this is the claim. And Hitchens razor says a claim made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Okay? Now, of course, they would want to say, come on, that's not true. Then my point is, yeah, please come in for an open debate on camera, uncut, unedited. I have made that invitation to Sheldon Pollock as just one example, but there are many others. I go to all these universities, Harvard University, I go, you know, get hold of Michael Witzel and so on. These guys will not come forward at all. But I would love them to come forward. Thank you.
Any questions for sir from the audience? Yes. You were first.
Please wait for the microphone.
Or you just
come in the front. Whoever has a question, please come in the front. That's easier. I can give you the microphone. Yeah. Just one. Yeah. Okay. We have gone over time. One question.
Yep.
Switch it on. Yeah.
Are there any historical or mythological references to Gilgamesh as well with respect to the Indian timeline?
Okay, so the Gilgamesh story, no. I mean, Gilgamesh is like a Levant story, right? Iraq and all. So no, not directly. I mean, I did make some attempt, but just because I made attempts and I failed doesn't mean that is the case. I mean, the research kind of continues. But just like I said, the Herodotus records, it's there. You can find similar thing with the Mexican information, with the Incas, we can find that, Copan, and we find tons of information. Many times our Itihasa text become the reference. Now this is fascinating. Our Itihasa text are becoming, so when we are talk of Itihasa, we are saying India's, knowing about India's antiquity. But honestly, it is knowing about the humanity's antiquity. Because the Indian texts are becoming the baseline, reference, foundational material to even understand what was happening in other parts of the world. And a lot of research is going on. We just don't have enough time to bring that out in some form. Thank you.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, just corner him outside. You can mob him outside.
Yeah, and my quick request is when you mob me outside, corner me, ask the question in such a way that I can simply answer yes or no. Okay? Thank you.
Sir, अभी आपने जैसे बताया we have empirical data, scientific data, evidences, सब we have. Despite having all the thing, despite having the greenest grass, why are conversions taking place? Why are we thinking हम कहाँ कमज़ोर पड़ रहे हैं कि मुझे लग रहा है the grass is greener on the other side?
Yeah. Okay. Everyone understood the question? Okay, so we have this all great stuff. Where are we failing? Again, there are many possibly facets to this. I'll just take one facet in a way of a metaphor to quickly convey the point. Think of this. How many of you, now that YouTube, everyone can watch the videos, how many of you have watched the videos, say, between the lions and Cape buffaloes of South Africa? No? If you don't watch these exciting, what do you guys watch? Okay, if you watch those, so the buffaloes are extremely strong creatures, especially Cape buffaloes, very aggressive, fierce, and all that. So are lions. But what you will find is, because Cape buffaloes are vegetarian and lion is non-vegetarian, even when the struggle happens, Cape buffalo is very strong, lion backs up for that time. But he's not, or he, she are not backing up forever. Just that time. Because they want to eat and they don't eat grass. So they always want to come and attack the buffalo when they can do it. Which is what? What is the nature of a lion? To just basically go, always they are after buffaloes, convert them into their body nutrition. So what happens, the challenge with the Abrahamic religions, specifically Christianity and Islam, not so much the Judaism, in fact none. Again, it's a long subject, so I won't give the answer. So you will find Judaism is not such a gung-ho conversion. There is a reason for it. It's a long one. I will not go there. But in Christianity and in Islam, it's all about conversion. It's like turning that into backwards. In Christianity, it is a salvation through community. And in Islam, it is the religion of the book. Everyone should follow the book. And in case of Christianity, it's salvation through community, the community who believes in the same thing. So they are in just like a lion. So they always want it. So even when they don't struggle, that time they may backtrack. But they are coming. So if Cape buffaloes think, okay, I'm safe now, you are never safe. So that's the vegetarian versus non-vegetarian is not in the human beings I'm talking, but in terms of the basic animal instinct. That is a good metaphor. So I have used that, and many people tend to connect with it. Thank you.
That was a very intellectually stimulating session. So a big round of applause again for both Anuja and Nilesh, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.